Poetry Month will come a little late this year. Poetry's freedom, which is to say, poetry's essential contribution to American culture, is grounded in its aversion of conformity and its resistance to the restrictions of market-driven popularity. Indeed, contemporary American poetry thrives through its small scale and radical differences of form. There is no one sort of American poetry, and certainly no right sort. This is what makes aesthetic invention so necessary. Free verse is not a type of non-metrical poetry, but an imperative to liberate verse from the constraints of obligatory convention and regulation. In that sense, free verse is an aspirational idea, and its stuttering breathlessness is a mark of its impossibility. I want not just a politics of identity, but an aesthetics of identity. While some may choose the straight path of self-righteousness, don't give up hope that they will return to the crooked roads that have no certainties. The goal is to find wilderness in bewilderment. Or is that the process? I am the shell of the person I once was, the shell of the shell. But then the person I once was is a shell of the person I am now. The more realistic a poet is, the more distant from reality. Abraham Sutzkever. I cannot make it decohere. The world doesn't make sense. We do. Sense is of the word and in the world. The non-human is also beyond the human. Assisted living. As opposed to what? Poetry is reacquired taste, after David Bergman. Nearly touching are the ethical realm of our obligation to others and the aesthetic world of our freedom from such obligations. For Rachel Levitsky. The loss of a public, Stanley Cavell writes, is in fact the artist's withdrawal from his public as a consequence of his faithfulness to his art. The public is lost to art because they are readying themselves for war, for life by the gun. They are also lost because of art, because art maintains itself against their assaults, and because, almost against its will, it unsettles the illusions by means of which civilized people conduct themselves. Those ardent in their belief and certain of God's will are the faithless ones. The thing is, life is a one-way street. God needs us more than we need them, because without us, they would not exist. But without them, we do. I'm for a single prayer initiative. God loves those who think for themselves. Owning words, Cavell's phrase connects to his conviction that we must mean what we say, that we are implicated in meaning beyond our ostensive intentions and mercurial inventions. If we do own our words, own up to them, it is because they own us. and we are in their debt. But owning words is also owing words. The debt we owe to language is paid not to words, but to one another. Physical distance, social intimacy, a kind of poetry. How the music learned to write. The poem that is true for all people and all times is true for no one and no time. I never met a person who cried fire when confronted by a snowball, but there are many today who cry freedom when confronted with tyranny. My agreement may be absolute to me, but that does not make it greater than yours. My freedom is only that to the extent it guarantees yours. Anything different to the extent of the difference is not liberty. It is oppression. Like a memorial, except we're all alive, or we imagine we're alive even though we died weeks ago. The fight for truthfulness is a fight against the claim of a single truth. At best, science and poetry move toward truth through an insistence on truthfulness. Religion and politics sometimes. Demagoguery never. The temporary loss of our physical commons is devastating, but the commons needed now is imaginary, not territorial. Language is a wilderness that, unlike others, can never be conquered or exhausted, but it can be made to accommodate, to submit, assimilate, compromise, deny. In contrast, I correspond for a poetry that dwells without disavowing, that is, that dwells in ways that make readers anxious, not only on the resplendent and difficult to contain, but also on the disturbed, confused, broken, awkward, difficult, dark. This is a poetry committed less to opposition than composition, a calm opposing that values inquiry above representation, resistance over adjudication, for a stubborn aversion to the conventions of expression, even for the sake of aversion, can be necessary relief in a society that confuses palpability for communication, packaging for style, tiny bites of messaging for meaning. For Jerome Rothenberg. Those who know God's truth won't say. Those who say don't know. After Abraham Stutzkever. Injury to the imaginary is trauma. The imaginary commons is art.